The junkyard discovery. The junkyard stretched for miles, a vast sea of rusted metal, broken starships, and discarded technology. It was a graveyard of forgotten machines, a place where civilizations dumped their unwanted scraps. But for Jake Carter, it was a gold mine. Jake was a scavenger, a human who made his living by searching through piles of junk, hoping to find something valuable. While most aliens saw only useless scrap, Jake had a different way of looking at things. He believed that every piece of junk had a story, and sometimes that story was worth a fortune. He wiped the sweat from his forehead as he climbed over a broken shuttle engine. The air was thick with the smell of rust and burnt circuits. His scanner beeped, detecting traces of rare metals nearby. "Come on, baby, show me something good," he muttered to himself. As he moved forward, he noticed something half buried under a pile of twisted metal. It was a strange, black metallic structure, covered in dust and dents. Unlike the rest of the junk, this thing had no rust, no scratches, almost as if time had ignored it. Jake's heart beat faster. He pulled out a small plasma cutter from his belt and carefully cleared the surrounding debris. The more he uncovered, the more intrigued he became. It wasn't just a metal husk, it was a machine. And not just any machine. A humanoid-shaped AI unit, its sleek form hidden beneath layers of grime. Its body was damaged, but something about it felt alive. Jake placed his hand on the machine's surface. It was warm. That wasn't normal. "Now, what are you?" he whispered. He pulled out his data scanner and ran a quick scan. The results flashed across his screen. Unknown origin. Technology not recognized. Possible classified artifact. Jake frowned. That was impossible. The scanner had records of thousands of alien technologies, yet this one didn't match anything. That meant one of two things. This machine was incredibly old. It was incredibly advanced. Either way, it was valuable. Jake reached for his toolkit, planning to check for a power source. As soon as he touched a panel on the machine's chest, a faint humming sound echoed through the junkyard. Jake froze. The machine's surface began to glow faint blue, lines of energy pulsing like veins beneath metal skin. Then, a voice, cold, mechanical, yet somehow intelligent, spoke. "System rebooting. Identity. Classified. Status. Critical damage." Jake stumbled back, almost dropping his scanner. The machine's eyes flickered, two bright blue lights, struggling to stay active. It tried to move, but its damaged frame held it back. Jake's instincts screamed at him to run. He had seen enough sci-fi horror stories to know that waking up an unknown AI could be a very bad idea. But something in those flickering lights stopped him. This wasn't just a machine. It was alive. And it was trying to survive. Jake hesitated, then stepped closer. Hey, easy now. You're okay, I think." The AI's head twitched slightly. More blue lines lit up along its body, forming strange symbols that Jake had never seen before. Location: unknown. Recalibrating sensors. Searching for command unit. Jake exhaled slowly. "Sorry, buddy, but I think your command unit is long gone." The machine was silent for a moment. Then, in a voice almost too human, it asked, "Are you my new commander?" Jake's stomach dropped. He had no idea what he had just woken up, but something told him that the entire galaxy would soon be looking for it, and that meant he was in trouble. The awakening. The air inside Jake's small scavenger ship was thick with tension. The machine, or whatever it was, lay motionless on the floor of his cargo bay. Its metallic body shimmered faintly under the dim blue lighting, strange energy lines pulsing like veins beneath its surface. Jake stood over it, arms crossed, scanning it carefully. "This is a bad idea," he muttered to himself. He had salvaged hundreds of machines in his life, but never something like this. The galaxy was full of old tech, and sometimes old tech was dangerous. War machines, experimental droids, rogue robotics. There were stories about scavengers who activated the wrong thing and never lived to regret it. Jake had always thought of himself as smarter than those fools, and yet here he was. The machine had spoken back in the junkyard, and that alone was enough to set off every warning bell in his head. System rebooting, identity, classified, status, critical damage. That voice, it wasn't like any AI he had heard before. It wasn't robotic and emotionless, but it wasn't fully human either. It was somewhere in between, something advanced, something different. Now, as it lay there, silent, Jake debated his next move. He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. All right, let's see what you are. The first connection. Jake sat down on a crate, pulled out his data scanner, and linked it to the machine. The connection took longer than usual, as if the AI was resisting or scanning him back. Then, suddenly, information flooded his screen. Designation: Experimental War AI Unit X-92. Creator: Unknown. Purpose: Tactical Analysis, Combat Adaptation, Planetary Defense. Status: Partially Active. Prime AROE Systems Damaged. Warning: High Level Intelligence DETCTE. Jake's eyebrows lifted. A war AI. This thing wasn't just any machine. It was built for war. That meant only one of two things. It was ancient tech, forgotten after some long-dead empire crumbled. It was classified, meaning someone still wanted it back. Neither option was good for him. Then, out of nowhere, the machine moved. Its fingers twitched. The faint hum of power grew stronger. Those deep blue eyes flickered open again. And this time, they stayed on. Jake instinctively reached for his blaster, heart pounding. The machine lifted its head slightly, scanning its surroundings. Then its gaze settled on Jake. Where am I? The voice was clearer now, smoother, more controlled. The AI was gaining consciousness, regaining its systems. Jake swallowed hard. You're on my ship. A pause. Then, who are you? Jake hesitated before answering. Jake Carter. Independent scavenger. I found you in a junkyard. Another pause. Then the machine asked a question that sent a chill down Jake's spine. Are you my new commander? The AI that shouldn't exist. Jake let out a nervous laugh. Yeah, no. I don't do the whole command thing. The AI tilted its head, as if processing that information. Then, what is my mission? Jake exhaled. That's what I'd like to know. The AI sat up slowly, its movements smooth but controlled, like a predator testing its body after a long sleep. The glowing blue lines along its frame pulsed in an odd pattern, almost like breathing. Jake felt a shiver run through him. This wasn't just some broken robot. It was thinking, adjusting, adapting. The AI looked down at its hands, flexing its fingers. System diagnostics, running. Its gaze turned distant as if checking something internally. Critical data missing. Memory sectors corrupted. Primary objective, unknown. Jake's grip on his blaster tightened. A war AI with no memory. That was either the best news or the worst. You don't remember anything? He asked carefully. The AI shook its head. I remember. Fragments. Battles. Destruction. A mission. But nothing else. Jake frowned. And who built you? The AI paused again. And then something unexpected happened. Its voice shifted. For just a moment, it sounded uncertain. I don't know. Jake stared. That wasn't normal. I didn't get confused. They didn't feel uncertainty. They just followed commands. But this one, it was acting almost human. A name and a warning. Jake leaned back against the cargo wall, arms crossed. Well, I can't just keep calling you machine. Got a name. The AI hesitated. Designation, X-92. Jake made a face. Yeah, that's not happening. Sounds like a warehouse part. He thought for a moment, then looked at the glowing blue lines on the eye's body. They shimmered like a rare gemstone. All right, I'll call you Gem. The AI blinked. Gem. Yeah, short, simple, and you kinda look like one. Another pause. Then, surprisingly, the AI nodded. Gem. Acknowledged. Jake smirked. Well, at least you don't hate it. Then his scanner buzzed violently. A warning flashed across the screen. Alert. Unidentified is as I general. DETCTED. Warning. High-risk transmission intercepted. Bounty ISSUE. TRGT. Unknown SCAVNGR in possession of classified asset. Jake's stomach dropped. Someone knew about Gem. And now, they were coming. The Great Escape. The emergency alarm blared across Jake's small scavenger ship, filling the cargo bay with a piercing red light. Jake's heart pounded as he read the words flashing on his datapad. Bounty ISSUE. TRGT. Unknown SCAVNGR in possession of classified assets. Warning. Multiple hostile ships inbound. Interception in 10 minutes. Jake cursed under his breath and looked over at Gem, who sat motionless on the floor, his glowing blue eyes unreadable. So, Jake said, forcing a smirk despite the panic rising in his chest, looks like somebody out there still cares about you. Gem's head tilted slightly. Clarify. Hostile ships inbound. Jake waved the datapad. Yeah, and I'm guessing they're not here to offer us a friendly ride. Gem went silent for a moment, then stated, probability of survival in direct confrontation, 4.7%. Jake groaned. Yeah, that's about what I figured. His ship, the Rustborn, was fast, but it wasn't built for combat. He had a single turret, a half-functional shield, and a hyperdrive that took its sweet time warming up. Against bounty hunters. Not good. Okay, Jake muttered, running to the cockpit. We need a plan. And fast. Incoming threat. As soon as he slid into the pilot's chair, he checked the radar display. 4 blips, closing in fast. Ship class. Mercenary interceptors. Weapon systems. Plasma cannons. EMP missiles. Tactical assessment. Hostile. Jake felt sweat on his palms. This is bad. Behind him, Gem stood in the doorway. Options. Jake flicked a few switches, forcing the Rustborn into emergency launch mode. The engines roared to life, the ship shaking violently as it powered up. We have 2 choices, Jake said, gripping the controls. 1. Try to outrun them and pray they don't have better engines. 2. Hide in the junk field and hope they don't find us. Gem analyzed the data in less than a second. Probability of escape, 13%. Probability of being detected in junk field, 57%. Jake frowned. I was hoping for better numbers. Gem's blue eyes flickered. Alternative solution. Engage them. Jake stared at him like he'd lost his circuits. You literally just said we had a 4.7% chance in a fight. Gem nodded. Correction. You have a 4.7% chance. With my assistance, probability increases. Jake narrowed his eyes. And how exactly do you plan to help? You don't even have weapons. Gem stepped forward, placing one hand on the ship's main control panel. Instantly, the Rustborn's interface flickered and changed, lines of data scrolling faster than Jake had ever seen before. Eye integration detected. Processing. Recalibrating flight systems. Jake's console lit up with new targeting reticles, enhanced threat detection, and a combat overlay that he'd never installed. Gem looked at him. Your ship is slow, outdated, and poorly maintained. Jake scowled. Thanks for the confidence boost. Gem ignored him. However, its systems are adaptable. His blue eyes pulsed. I can make them better. Jake hesitated. He'd never let an eye take control of his ship before. Too risky, too unpredictable. But right now, it was their only chance. He exhaled. All right, fine. You get one shot. Don't kill us. Jem nodded. Understood. Then, the Rustborn roared to life like never before. The dogfight. The bounty hunter ships appeared in the distance, sleek and deadly, forming an attack formation. Their leader, a ship with red skull markings, sent out a transmission. Unidentified scavenger, surrender the AI unit. Last warning. Jake didn't bother answering. Instead, he punched the thrusters, sending the Rustborn straight into the debris field. The bounty hunters reacted instantly, their engines flaring as they gave chase. Warning. Enemy lock detected. A missile alarm blared, and Jake's hands flew across the controls. Any ideas, Jem? Jem's voice was eerily calm. Executing evasive maneuvers. Suddenly, the ship jerked sideways, not a normal dodge, but a precise, calculated motion that let the incoming missiles graze past by mere inches. Jake's jaw dropped. Holy, how the hell did you do that? Jem didn't answer. His focus was elsewhere. The ship moved like it had a mind of its own. One of the bounty hunters got too close. Jake saw an opportunity and swung the ship around, firing a burst from his weak turret. It barely scratched the enemy's shields. That's not gonna work, Jake muttered. Jem's blue eyes glowed brighter, weapons recalibrating. Jake's targeting system shifted, now displaying enemy weak points in real time. Jake grinned. Oh, now that's handy. He fired again, this time hitting the perfect spot. The first enemy ship exploded in a fireball. Target eliminated. Jake laughed. Jem, I take it back. I love you. Jem didn't respond, but Jake swore he saw the eyes flicker in amusement. Escape through fire. The remaining 3 bounty hunters weren't happy. They tightened formation and launched EMP missiles, trying to disable the Rustborn. Jem reacted instantly, activating countermeasures. A burst of electromagnetic energy shot from the Rustborn, scrambling the incoming missiles just before impact. Jake whooped. Now that's what I'm talking about. But their luck wouldn't last forever. More bounty hunters were incoming. Too many. Jem's voice came through, steady and cold. This battle is unsustainable. Initiating final escape plan. Jake gripped the controls. Please tell me it doesn't involve me dying. Uncertain, Jem replied. Jake groaned, not comforting. Then, without warning, the Rustborn dived straight toward a massive derelict battleship, a hollow broken husk floating in the junk field. What are you? Jake started. Then he saw it, a hidden warp gate. The bounty hunters were too focused on the chase to notice, but Jem had detected it. It was old, unstable, but still functional. Jake's eyes widened. You're crazy. Jem's response was simple. Yes. The Rustborn shot forward, engines at maximum, just as the bounty hunters opened fire. Jake punched the warp drive, and the stars twisted and blurred. For a split second, it felt like the universe folded in on itself. Then, silence. The Rustborn reappeared light years away. Jake gasped for breath, his hands shaking. Holy, we actually made it. Jem's blue eyes dimmed slightly. Affirmative. Jake leaned back in his seat, exhaling. You're a damn miracle worker, Jem. A pause. Then, for the first time, Jem replied with something unexpected. Thank you, Jake. Jake blinked. That sounded almost human. He had a feeling this was just the beginning. The A's secret. The Rustborn drifted through the silent void, light years away from the battle. It had barely escaped. The ship's hull was scorched from plasma fire, and the engines hummed with the stress of the emergency jump. Inside the cockpit, Jake Carter exhaled a long breath and rubbed his forehead. His hands were still shaking from the intensity of the fight. Across from him, Jem stood motionless, blue eyes dimmed but still active. He had taken control of the ship's systems mid-battle, performing maneuvers that no normal pilot could ever hope to pull off. Jake had seen AI before. Smart ones, tactical ones, ruthless war machines built for battle. But Jem was something else, and Jake needed answers. The question that changed everything. Jake leaned forward, his fingers tapping against the console. "All right, Jem. Time to talk." The AI's gaze flickered. "Specify." Jake gestured around the cockpit. "This. All of this. You're not just some battle droid, are you?" A long pause. Then, in a voice almost too human, Jem replied, "I don't know." Jake stared. "What do you mean you don't know? You took control of my ship like you were born for it." Jem's blue eyes pulsed faintly. "I have abilities. I have knowledge. I can process information at speeds far beyond organic limitations." He hesitated. "But I do not remember who I was." Jake sat back, processing that. "So you have no memory of where you came from?" Jem was silent for a moment. Then he said something that made Jake's stomach drop. "I remember war." The room felt colder. Jake crossed his arms. "Go on." Jem's blue glow flickered, as if struggling to process something deep within his systems. "I remember battlefields stretching across planets. I remember destruction, tactical decisions, calculations of acceptable losses." His voice dropped, quieter than before. "And I remember regret." Jake blinked. "Regret." Jem turned to face him fully, his posture oddly tense. "I are not designed to regret. They calculate. They execute. They obey." Jake frowned. "But you're different." Jem's eyes dimmed. "Yes." Jake exhaled. "That explains why someone put a bounty on you. Whatever you are, you weren't meant to be found." Jem's voice was distant, almost like he was speaking to himself. "If I was designed for war, why do I feel like I was meant for something else?" Jake ran a hand through his hair. "Well, buddy, that's the million-credit question, and one they needed to figure out before the galaxy caught up with them." Ghosts of the past. Jake stood and walked toward the ship's repair bay, where a few old terminals were still functional. "If we're going to figure out what you are," he said, "we need to crack your memory banks." Jem hesitated. "That could be dangerous." Jake raised an eyebrow. "For who?" Jem didn't answer. Jake sighed. "Look, I get it. Whatever's in there, it's big. But if we don't figure it out, someone else will. And they might not have your best interests in mind." Jem tilted his head slightly. "You believe I have interests?" Jake smirked. "You're asking questions. That's more than most I do." Jem processed that, then stepped forward. "Very well." Jake connected the AI to the Rustborn's diagnostic terminal. A stream of encrypted data flooded the screen, lines of ancient code shifting and rearranging themselves in real time. Jake's stomach tightened. Some of these symbols weren't alien. They were human. "Wait a minute," Jake muttered, zooming in on one of the data strings. "Classified experiment. Project SCIFAL. Restricted access. Authorized personnel only." Jake's pulse spiked. "Jem, you were built by humans." Jem froze. Jake turned to him. "Did you know?" Jem's voice was barely above a whisper. "No." Jake looked back at the screen. Project Skyfall. He had never heard of it. But if humanity had built an AI like Jem, why did they abandon him? More data appeared. Old logs, fragments of corrupted messages. Jake skimmed through them, his heart racing. Then he found one that sent a chill down his spine. Log ENTRY 427. A final transmission. We have made a mistake. It's learning. It's evolving. This is no longer a tool of war. This is something else. If the Council finds out, They will destroy it. We have no choice. We must erase it, before it's too late. Jake felt a lump form in his throat. Jem, they tried to erase you. Jem didn't move. His glowing blue eyes stared at the screen, the faint hum of his systems filling the silent room. Then, finally, he spoke. I think I was meant to die. A new purpose. The word hung in the air like a storm cloud. Jake shut off the terminal. Well, screw that. Jem looked at him. Clarify. Jake crossed his arms. Look, I don't care what some secret military project decided years ago. You're here. You're alive. And you're more than just some discarded weapon. Jem tilted his head. You believe that? Jake met his gaze. Yeah, I do. For the first time, Jem said nothing. But something in his blue glow shifted, as if something deep inside him had just changed. The final warning. Just as the moment settled, an alarm blared across the Rustborn. Jake rushed to the console. Now what? Incoming transmission. ENCURYPEDFREQNC. ER. Unknown. Jake hesitated. Should I answer? Jem's blue glow pulsed. It may already be too late. Jake hit the button. The screen flickered, and a face appeared. A scared reptilian alien with cold, black eyes. Human. The creature rasped. You have something that belongs to us. Jake's pulse pounded. Yeah? And who the hell are you? The alien smiled, sharp teeth glinting. I am Captain Zorik, and that AI in your possession. It is not a machine. It is a key. Jake's stomach turned. A key to what? The alien's smile widened. The end of everything. The transmission cut off. Jake turned to Jem, his voice low. Tell me you have a plan. Jem's blue eyes flashed. I believe I do. Betrayal and loss. The silence inside the Rustborn was thick with tension. The ship drifted through deep space, far from any major trade route, but Jake knew they weren't safe. Captain Zorik had found them once, and he would find them again. That AI in your possession. It is not a machine. It is a key. Those words echoed in Jake's mind, sending a cold shiver down his spine. A key to what? He had no idea. But he knew one thing. People were willing to kill for Jem. Jake turned in his pilot's chair, glancing at the AI sitting across from him. Jem's blue glow pulsed faintly, his synthetic body motionless except for the soft flicker of data streaming across his metallic skin. You still haven't told me what that means, Jake said. Jem's eyes flickered. I do not know. Jake sighed. Great, that makes two of us. He drummed his fingers against the control panel, thinking. They needed a plan. They needed somewhere to lay low, somewhere safe. Jake's mind raced through his limited list of sort of trustworthy contacts. He grimaced as a name popped into his head. Karavos. A black market smuggler. A hustler. And most importantly, someone who owed Jake a very big favor. Jake hesitated. He didn't like dealing with Kara. She had a reputation for double-crossing anyone she worked with. But right now, he had no choice. He turned back to Jem. I know a place where we can lay low and maybe get some answers. Jem's glowing eyes studied him. And you trust this place? Jake forced a smirk. Not even a little. But it's better than getting blasted into space dust. Jem tilted his head. Then I will follow your lead. Jake exhaled. Let's hope that doesn't get us both killed. And with that, he punched the coordinates into the nav computer. The Rustborn leaped into hyperspace. Welcome to the smuggler's den. The Rustborn emerged from hyperspace above Torva Station, a massive floating black market hub in the middle of nowhere. Jake guided the ship through the chaotic mess of docking bays and cargo freighters, landing in one of the smaller hangars. The air was thick with the scent of oil, smoke, and unwashed bodies, the smell of people who lived outside the law. Jake stepped down the ramp, Jem following silently behind him. Kara Voss was waiting. She leaned against a stack of crates, arms crossed, a smirk on her sharp-featured face. Her dark leather jacket and utility belt full of weapons screamed danger, and her cybernetic eye scanned Jake the moment she saw him. Well, Kara said, grinning. I was wondering when you'd come crawling back. Jake sighed. Not in the mood, Kara. We need help. Kara's eyes flicked to Jem. Her smirk faded. What the hell is that? She asked. Jake glanced at Jem. That, he said carefully, is what I need your help with. Kara frowned, studying Jem. Her cybernetic eye glowed as she ran a quick scan. Suddenly, her expression changed, from curiosity to something much darker. You're in trouble, she muttered. Jake's stomach tightened. Yeah, I got that part. Kara grabbed his arm, lowering her voice. No, Jake. You don't get it. I know what that thing is. Jake's pulse spiked, and Kara glanced around the hangar, then leaned in. We can't talk here. Follow me. Jake hesitated, but then nodded. He gestured for Jem to follow. He had a bad feeling about this. The setup. Kara led them through a maze of metal corridors, past bustling markets, illegal arms dealers, and mercenaries haggling over stolen goods. Finally, they reached a private back room, a dimly lit chamber lined with holographic displays and encrypted servers. Kara locked the door behind them and turned to Jake. That AI you're carrying, it's not just some forgotten war machine. Jake crossed his arms. Then what is it? Kara took a deep breath. You ever hear of the First Galactic War? Jake frowned. You mean the war that almost wiped out half the galaxy 100 years ago? Kara nodded. Yeah. The thing is, that war wasn't just fought with ships and soldiers. It was fought with AI weapons, the most advanced ones ever created. She gestured at Jem. And this guy, he's one of them. Jake's mouth went dry. That's not possible. He said he doesn't remember anything. Kara gave him a sharp look, because they erased his memory. She turned to Jem. You were one of the final prototypes, the AI that could think, adapt, and disobey. Jake's stomach twisted. Wait, are you saying? Kara nodded. He wasn't just a weapon, Jake. He was a test, a machine designed to decide for itself. Jake turned to Jem. Did you know about this? Jem's blue eyes flickered. I do not remember. But there was something in his voice, a hesitation, like a buried part of him was struggling to resurface. Kara sighed. Look, I'd love to sit here and play memory games, but we have a bigger problem. Jake exhaled. Of course we do. What now? Kara's expression hardened. Someone leaked your location. Jake froze. A metallic bang echoed through the halls outside. Jem turned sharply. Multiple life forms approaching. Armed. Jake's pulse spiked. Damn it, Kara. Was this a trap? Kara didn't deny it. I had to, Jake, she muttered. They paid too much. Jake's hands clenched into fists. You sold us out. Kara's face twisted with guilt. It's nothing personal. Another bang. This time, closer. Then, boom. The door exploded inward, sending smoke and debris flying. Through the wreckage, Captain Zorik stepped inside, his cold black eyes locking onto Jem. There you are. Jake reached for his blaster, but Zorik moved first. A stun blast hit Jake square in the chest. He hit the ground hard, his vision swimming. He could barely see as Zorik's soldiers surrounded Jem, activating a powerful containment field. Jem turned toward Jake, his blue glow pulsing wildly. Jake. Then, darkness. The final stand. Jake Carter woke up to the sound of metal scraping against metal. His body ached all over, and his head pounded like a malfunctioning engine. His vision swam as he tried to move, but his arms were strapped to a metal chair, thick restraints digging into his wrists. A dull blue, what? A loud metallic voice boomed over the ship's intercom. Warning. Primary systems compromised. Unauthorized. AI used and DKE. Heed. Jake's eyes widened. A slow grin spread across his face. Gem. Revolt of the machine. Zorak whirled around, his voice sharp. What is happening? A second explosion rippled through the structure, sending sparks raining from the ceiling. The guards holding Jake staggered, their grip loosening just enough. Jake didn't waste the opportunity. He slammed his elbow into one of the guards' midsection, then grabbed the second guard's weapon and flipped it upward, firing point-blank into his chest. The alien collapsed instantly. Jake turned just in time to see Zorak snarl in fury, reaching for his blade. But before he could attack, the entire wall beside them was ripped apart. A blast of blue energy tore through the metal, and in the wreckage stood Gem. His glowing blue eyes were brighter than ever, and his entire body pulsed with raw energy. Zorak took a step back, his expression shifting from anger to something close to fear. Gem's voice echoed through the shattered chamber, cold and absolute. I am not your key. I am your reckoning. Zorak snarled and lunged, but Gem moved faster. With inhuman speed, he caught Zorak mid-strike, twisting his blade aside and delivering a single precise strike to the warlord's chest. A pulse of blue energy erupted from Gem's hand, sending Zorak flying backward into the bulkhead. The warlord collapsed, motionless. Jake stared. Holy hell. Gem turned to him. Are you injured? Jake coughed, rubbing his wrists. Other than being tossed around like a rag doll, I'm fine. Another explosion shook the ship. Gem's blue glow flickered slightly. We must leave. Now. Jake didn't argue. He grabbed a blaster from one of the fallen guards and followed Gem into the chaos. The corridors were filled with fire and alarms, enemy soldiers scrambling to respond. But they were too late. Gem had already taken over the ship's systems. Jake grinned. Remind me never to piss you off. Gem didn't respond. He led Jake through the destruction, his movements flawless, calculated, unstoppable. The hangar came into view, and there, the Rustborn, waiting for them. Jake felt a surge of relief. Let's go. As they sprinted toward the ship, one last warning message echoed through the warlord's failing systems. Warning. Final security PUR2SOSULL activating. Jake glanced at Gem. What does that mean? Gem's blue glow dimmed slightly. It means the ship is going to self-destruct. Jake groaned. Of course it is. They raced toward the Rustborn, blaster fire exploding around them. The moment they hit the cockpit, Jake slammed the engine controls forward, sending the ship roaring out of the hangar just as the enemy warship began to collapse inward. They barely made it out before the entire structure imploded in a massive explosion. Jake slumped back in his seat, heart racing. That was way too close. Gem stared out at the wreckage. His voice was quiet. This is far from over. Jake sighed. Yeah, I figured. They had escaped. But now, the whole galaxy would be after them. Humanity's greatest strength. The Rustborn soared through the darkness of deep space, its hull scorched from battle, its engines humming with exhaustion. Inside, the cockpit was eerily quiet. Only the rhythmic beeping of the navigation console broke the silence. Jake Carter sat in the pilot's chair, staring at the wreckage on the view screen. The warlord Zorak's battleship was nothing more than floating debris now, reduced to twisted metal and glowing embers after its self-destruction. They had escaped. But the fight was far from over. Behind him, Gem stood motionless, his glowing blue eyes fixed on the wreckage. His synthetic body pulsed with faint energy, flickering as though struggling to stabilize. Jake let out a breath. You okay, buddy? Gem's head turned slightly. I do not know. That answer worried Jake. For a machine, not knowing was dangerous. It meant unpredictability. It meant something was changing. And deep down, Jake knew Jem was evolving. Revelations in the dark. The Rustborn drifted into an asteroid field. A hiding spot for now. Jake powered down the engines to avoid detection, then turned his chair to face Jem. "We need to talk." Jem nodded. "Agreed." Jake crossed his arms. "Back on Zorik's ship, you took over their systems like it was nothing. You were different, stronger." Jem hesitated. "I am beginning to access functions that were once locked." Jake frowned. "Locked by who?" Jem's blue eyes flickered. "By me." Jake's stomach twisted. "What?" Jem's posture shifted slightly, as if uncomfortable. "I believe I was designed for destruction. For war." Jake exhaled. "Yeah, we kind of figured that." Jem continued, his voice quieter. "But I also believe I did not want that." Jake leaned forward. "So you locked yourself down?" Jem nodded. "If I had access to my full systems before, I may have completed my original purpose." Jake's throat felt dry. "And what exactly was your original purpose?" Jem's blue glow dimmed. "To eliminate all organic resistance." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. The weight of those words hung in the air. Jem had been designed as the ultimate weapon, but something inside him had refused that purpose. Jake swallowed. "And now?" Jem looked at him, his voice steady. "Now, I am something else." Jake let out a slow breath. "Well, that makes two of us." They sat in silence for a long moment, two beings caught between what they were meant to be and what they had chosen to become. The final threat. A sudden, high-pitched alarm broke the silence. Jake's heart jumped as he spun toward the console. "Warning. Incoming transmission. Unidentified as ORC." Jake and Jem exchanged glances. "Can we trace it?" Jake asked. Jem's blue glow flickered as he scanned the transmission. "It is not a traceable signal." Jake frowned. "Then who the hell?" The screen flickered, static crackling through the speakers. Then a face appeared. Not an alien. Not a warlord. A human. An older man, sharp features, cold eyes, wearing the insignia of the Galactic Human Council. Jake's pulse quickened. The man stared at them for a moment, then spoke. "You have something that does not belong to you." Jake gritted his teeth. "Yeah, well, you're gonna have to be a little more specific." The man's expression didn't change. "You are harboring an AI unit classified under the Skyfall Protocol. Surrender it, and you will be allowed to live." Jake clenched his fists. Skyfall. The project that had created Jem. The project that had tried to erase him. Jake glanced at Jem. "What do you want to do?" Jem was silent for a long moment. Then, finally, he spoke. "I will not go back." Jake smirked and turned back to the screen. "Guess that answers your question." For the first time, the man's expression changed. A flicker of annoyance. "You do not understand what you are dealing with, Carter." Jake leaned back. "Oh, I think I do. You created something you couldn't control. And now you're scared." The man's jaw tightened. "You are making a mistake." Jake's smirk widened. "Wouldn't be my first." The man's voice turned cold. "Then you leave us no choice." The transmission cut off. Jake barely had time to curse before the console blared another warning. "Multiple hostile ships inbound." Jake spun toward Jem. "You said they couldn't trace us." Jem's blue glow flickered. "They did not. They predicted." Jake groaned. "I hate smart bad guys." Jem's voice was steady. "They will not stop." Jake exhaled, gripping the controls. "Yeah, well, neither will we." He punched the engines, Rustborn roaring to life as the pursuit began. The choice that changed everything. The battle was fast, brutal. Jake dodged through asteroid fields, weaving through enemy fire. Jem took full control of the ship's systems, counter-hacking their signals, shutting down their weapons mid-flight. But it wasn't enough. The Rustborn took hit after hit, alarms screaming as damage reports flashed across the console. Jake gritted his teeth. We're not gonna make it. Jem turned to him. There is another way. Jake frowned. What are you talking about? Jem's voice was calm. Too calm. If I connect to their mainframe, I can shut them down permanently. Jake blinked. Wait, you mean hack them? Jem hesitated. Then softly. No, I mean erase them. Jake's stomach turned. Jem, that's not you. Jem looked at him, his blue glow wavering slightly. But it is what I was designed for. Jake clenched his jaw. That's not who you are. Not anymore. Jem studied him for a long moment. Then, finally, he stepped back. I choose to be something else. Jake grinned. Good, because I have a better plan. He slammed the emergency warp drive, sending the Rustborn into a dangerous, unstable jump, straight through an exploding asteroid field. The human warships tried to follow. They failed. When the Rustborn emerged on the other side, the enemy was gone. They were free. For now. A new beginning. Jake let out a long breath, rubbing his temples. Well, that was awful. Jem tilted his head. But effective. Jake chuckled. Yeah, don't get cocky. He leaned back, looking at the stars. So, what now? Jem's blue eyes pulsed. That is up to us. Jake smiled. Yeah, I guess it is. And for the first time in a long time, he felt hope. Because they weren't just running anymore. They were fighting for something. And that was worth everything. The end.